Instagram to catch up, and then we'll do this thing.
Hell yeah.
Well, anytime now.
Yeah, mine's taking a sec too.
Well,
And there we go.
there it is. And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Social, which means it's Tuesday, which means that something happens after this episode. And in this case, on this specific Tuesday, it's the call-in show, which I'm very excited for because the call-in show is always a lot of fun. And sometimes we get some callers and other times we don't get as many callers, but we do answer questions from the community. And so if you have any questions and you would like them to be included in this Q&A, but you don't want to call, then you can do so by just firing it onto the Discord, putting it in the comments section during the show, or letting us know on Patreon if you're on Patreon, because we definitely do try to pay attention to what's happening on Patreon. But it's a social episode, so we're going to chat about a bunch of shit. I have been having just a grand old time in terms of Instagram commentary and just again, like that expression that, you know, the tree by the fruit it bears, you know, it's kind of like the proof is in the pudding, as it were. There's so many people who are just so fragile and so rigid and uptight, and it's because there is this attachment, you know, this desperation even for a silver bullet or some certainty, some, you know, guidance, a father figure, perhaps, any of those things, but just a right path. And they don't see that in continuing to just relentlessly attack, you know, you are wrong and you're the child of Satan and all this stuff. Like, they don't even recognize how much they're going through. They're not even looking at the fruit that their tree bears. You know, and they're fucking steeped in it, you know, like they are definitely in that pudding, as it were, and they're tasting it, and it's all over everything they do and how they treat others and their insistence that they must be right despite all of the obvious consequences that they're suffering from. And so I think it's just really important to recognize, like, it's really not about being liked. I think it's important to keep that in mind. You know, like the more you are yourself, the more you are talking from something that you actually experience, the less those who want to have faith in their own experience will want to hear you. It's not because you don't have anything of value to say, but it's because it's coming from a place that terrifies them. And that's the one thing I keep getting. You're going to suffer. One day you're gonna pay for all the people you're leading astray. Like, do you hear all this? Like, they're so used to being followers that they assume everybody else must want to follow me if I'm, you know, contradicting their message. Oh my God, it's competition. And it's like, no, I don't want followers. And there's a whole bunch of people out there who are tired of following. But when it's all you know, it's all you believe, it's all you're looking at, then that's what you see in other people. And so it's really interesting, you know, to just recognize that people are looking at you in a way that validates how they want to see themselves. And if they want to actually have the courage to question how they see themselves, then more than likely they're going to have a conversation with you. You know, something's going to change. But yeah, no, it's just so funny just to watch all of these people just having a meltdown. How dare you say you are already connected to God? How dare you say that you're at peace? How dare you say you're in the garden? And they get so angry, so angry. And it's the reason that they're missing the entire experience I'm trying to say is possible. And I'm not trying to say it's possible in theory. I'm trying to say it's possible. Well, I'm not even trying to say it's possible. I'm saying it's possible because I'm enjoying it. You know, I'm enjoying it as much as I can. And that's most of the goddamn time. And when I'm not enjoying it, I'm starting to enjoy that. You know, but that's the whole point. So, I mean, somebody had asked, like, why do you go back and forth with these people like that? I'm like, you know, it gives them an opportunity, but more importantly, it doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't cost me anything. There's nothing they can threaten. I mean, as soon as they start feeling unstable and threatened, they immediately run back to the quoting and then saying the Bible speaks for itself, and no, this is objective truth, and here's another quote, and here's another quote, and then that quote backs up this quote, and that quote backs up this quote, and most of the time even the quotes just contradict one another, but they've just been, fed this shit their whole life. It's again, it's the soup they swim in. So the point being is that if you're being yourself, don't expect everyone to like it. But that's the question: is it worth it to you? Is it worth it to you? Is it worth it to you to be yourself despite people not liking it? To me, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not here to be liked. But that said, not everybody dislikes me either. And it's up to them. They're dealing with their own shit. All I have to know is my intention. And my intention is not to do harm. My intention is just to be honest. My intention, like all of the videos I've made are just kind of, making a point. And it's funny because I was like, the whole one about good and evil, like the tree of knowledge of good and evil was really what the serpent wanted us to eat from, like, and it's in the book, that's the whole thing, like it wanted us to believe in good and evil. And so immediately somebody's like, so you're judging Christianity for judging good and evil, and I'm like, it wasn't a judgment, I was just pointing something out. But they take it very personally because that's the point. Everything's very personal to them. It's all about, their fears, how they think about themselves. Somebody actually said the other day, like, how is it self-absorbed if I'm thinking about myself as being lower than God, that something's wrong with me, that we're inherently evil? It's like, that's a lot of thinking about yourself. How is that not self-absorbed?
I know this idea that self-absorption is only a positive thing. It's like, no, anytime you're focused on some story that you're telling yourself. And I've been having a lot more fun with the religion conversations because it's really interesting to dig in. And I'm definitely I don't know, I feel like it's like this time around, like we've made this sort of, I don't know, like just looking at the absurdity of religion like a number of times, but like, because it is. And that's why you don't talk about it. Like, that's why people don't want to look at it because it's such a thin little veil. Like, you grow up and like, I wasn't necessarily steeped in religious dogma all the time, but it was something I was involved in. I took a lot of pride in being like Catholic and I mean, I was the best rule follower. The best. The best. The best. Like no one could follow rules better than I could. I was king of the crop with that, which is so funny that I'm like, I don't know, that I do stuff now, like even just smoking regularly, and I want to make sure we don't do anything on here too much. But yeah, I was really proud of that. But
It's
yeah,
Instagram. We can get away with it.
I think we're okay with talking about weed a little bit. And speaking of shout out, we got a retreat coming up in a month, 1 month, Kushcation. It's called. Indoor is allowed. It's going to be a blast. Very much looking forward to it. Yeah, we did a similar, same spot last year in June. And that was a, very eye-opening retreat in a lot of ways. But, yeah, what the fuck was I saying about growing up steeped, telling you stuff about religion and whatever it was, but just getting back into that, like it becomes very much just something that you do, it's just something that you are. And the thought of questioning it, like, I don't know, at points in my life, like didn't even feel like it made sense. It was like, why would I do that? But then when you start looking at it and just like dig into it a little bit, it's like, well, yeah, but I don't know that. And it took me, I'm realizing right now, it took me being in college. And I guess that's a lot of the time. Ah, fuck. Like when someone's in college is like first time away from like, the bubble they grew up in. And there's an opportunity to see different types of people. And that's what you can continue to do throughout your life. And that of course expands. And so if you're just maintaining like everything you've always known, there's going to be like the same sorts of things. Like I didn't even feel like I had an opportunity until like one of my very good friends in college like was atheist and like one of the best dudes I knew. And like for me growing up, it was always like atheist equals bad. And so it's just a willingness, like, because in certain mindsets, it feels like it doesn't make sense until you start recognizing I don't know, the consequence and just what it reinforces in the like the fucking depth of everything that it's spouts from and what it's reinforcing, and that it's just a component of this whole story that you're telling yourself. Like there's fundamental components and then there's, the varying components, but like at its core, that story is like something that you can almost reinforce. And I'm wondering now, like as thoughts flutter through, it's like this underlying sense of like being able to have a story that's kind of almost more reinforced by what you do and like your surroundings a little bit than it is the immediacy of certain thoughts. But then it's like certain things spout certain perceptions about things, or like even if it's the experience that then you have thoughts about, and then that reinforces some sort of narrative or story. And so with the religion stuff, it's like that's just a component of that there, but at its core, like that's always what we, tend to settle upon thinking that we are. And it kind of like there can be a cascade as start to wonder about, a couple of the pieces, and that gives opportunity. And so religion's just a decent one to go for because it's been destructive as fucking shit over the years.
Well, in Christianity especially, like when it comes down to, which monotheistic belief has had the biggest negative impact on our history. And again, like I'm not in the same way that like I don't vilify it as a European mentality. It's just ego, right? Like, it's just ego. It's just in what form did the ego actually take root? In some cases it was Europe. In some cases, it was the United States. In some cases it was Christianity. And that was really it. So I'm not in any way judging where it comes from, but it is always ego. That's kind of the point. And so questioning Christianity is just one of those things that makes sense to do. But again, like understand we're not really questioning Christianity because there's this I guess assumption that everybody kind of falls under, and there's a lot of assumptions that we fall under, but basically we always start to assume that the Bible was written by one person. They ever notice that, how often they're like, it's the word of God, one person, one author? And that's not the case. Like each book was written by different people, and not even the people that it's claiming to be written by. Half the time it's not written by those people at all. And I'm talking about the New Testament here, obviously, right? But that's kind of the point, is that it's not written by one person, and yet it's argued that way. It's argued as if it's written by God, but it contradicts itself all the time. Like it contradicts itself all the time. It's funny. I just recently learned this one, and it kind of made me giggle. That Mark and John don't agree on when Jesus was crucified, like the time of day.
That seems like something that might be kind of a little bit important to look at. Like, yeah, there's a little like glitch right there. It's like I'm surprised they didn't patch that one up, like King James getting in there. It's like, let's just
Well, that's it though. It's because they know, like, I don't think they assumed anyone would notice. Like everybody just kind of gets caught up in arguing what they want to believe rather than what's in the book, right? And then what I find funny about this is that all I have to do is go, well, maybe he meant this, and they just fucking melt down. Like I found it really funny because somebody was like, oh well, what about Thomas? I'm like, have you ever read the Gospel of Thomas? They're like, no, because it was thrown out of the church because it's Gnostic. It's like, you understand they're all Gnostic, right? Like each and every one of those stories, like the Gnostics were the people that were being quoted, the people that were telling the stories before they were Christian. You get that, right? And I just find it funny. It's just like the Gnostics were heretical. It's like, no, it's just that there was a group of people who went, we don't like those messages. We like this message that empowers us. Which leads me to my recent suspicion that Peter was a fucknut. And what I mean is that, and I find this really funny.
He's first pope, right?
This would be the first pope. That's correct. So, and Christians always go, yeah. Well, what about this chapter where he says, "And on this rock I will build my church," and he puts his hand on Peter. He's talking about self-awareness. He's talking about people being willing to have the conversation, to question, to go on this narrow path. Like he's talking about something much deeper. But they're like, no, he's talking about Peter, which I think is exactly what was capitalized on here, because Peter refused Jesus 3 times. He denied Jesus 3 times. When the Romans came for Jesus and they're like, "Do you know this man?" And he's like, "No." And they're like, "You sure you don't know this man?" He's like, "No." And he's like, "Are you positive you don't know this man?" He's like, "Absolutely not." Right? That guy, that guy became the Pope. And what I find funny is that the argument is the reason he's the Pope is because zombie Jesus came back and said so, says the Church of Peter. And in no way does that seem suspicious. Eh? Isn't that funny? That the church itself, and I've been saying this forever, that Christianity is the avoidance of everything Jesus was talking about, because what Jesus was talking about didn't put anybody in a church, and it didn't establish any kind of hierarchy outside of you and God. Right? But, that's Gnostic. That's Gnostic. And that's exactly what the issue with the Gospel of Thomas was that it argued for self-awareness rather than blind belief. And what I heard today from a number of people is, well, it was written hundreds of years after the other texts. Nope. Actually, they estimate it might have been written earlier than some of the other texts. So that's all just, again, people wanting to hold on to what they want to hold on to. And so you can argue those points, but it's really easy. And somebody said this to me the other day, like, I'd really like to kind of learn more about the Bible so I can talk to these people about these things. That's the trap. Because they're not talking about God. That's the whole point. If they were, they'd put the Bible down. Right? Because Christians also fall under this delusion that somehow Christianity created God. Like, I find it so funny. They're just like, yeah, well, if you don't follow the holy word, you'll never find God. It's like, you think God just poof, popped out with Jesus? Like, you think people up until that point could not, have not, and never will connect to God? Because there's a book full of people before the New Testament that disagree. Right? A book full of them. And if you want to go back far enough, Adam and Eve didn't even have to worship God. Just saying. And they were hanging in the garden with him.
Oh man, I don't know if that hit me before, that like they'll push the book to be pointed to, and that's not really something, like, I'm not quite as familiar with like the hardcore Christianity type stuff at like Bible thumping type thing versus like I'm more familiar with like I don't know, like casual Catholics, I guess, for the most part, and some like less casual Catholics. It's just like, yeah, the thing you do, and it's kind of like you. It comes to a point because it's like, what is it? Mortal sin if you miss church on Sunday. That's like the thing. So it's like if you miss a couple, then it's like, well, what's a couple more? And more, and then it's like, why am I? Is it really? And it's like, there's worse people. If I'm going to heaven, I'll probably slide in there because there's all this other stuff going on that I'm judging and looking to. But yeah, the pointing to the Bible, even there, like where it starts, it as if, yeah, as if you can find that. So it's almost like there's this, like, if you think about timeline of God, and then it's like, the Christian portion, the Bible kind of pops up, but it's like there's an underlying thing here where it's like pre-Christianity still going on. What was going on? There were still people before, and I guess that's where the creationist belief of like 6,000 years, that's probably where that comes from. Because it's like it must have, because that, like, I almost have a little bit of respect for that because they're at least going all in on the versus yeah, well, it's before Christianity, but like, let's not talk about that. But there was still stuff, and these guys are just like, no, no, 6,000 years, 6,000 years. That's where we're at. But it's like, you kind of have to, it's like, well, there's a lot of gray before that if you don't believe that that was the start. But if you're willing to just dive into that, it's like fucking respect in a sense. But yeah, I'm enjoying coming back to this and just looking at where it comes from and looking at how it's like looking again, like looking to something to guide you, looking to something to tell you what to do, looking to someone, it's like, someone, please tell me what to do next. Whereas when you like look at that for a second, like maybe no one really knows. Like you look at society and there's all these things that are like seem set in stone, but those are all fluid all the time too. Like what's going on, like even certain ways of acting, like manners. That's like this thing that's going to shift based on the culture and based on, so there's all these different things going different, right ways. So we're just buying into that to, yeah, feel a little bit more comfortable, like we're doing something each and every time, even looking to a single person outside of yourself, not a group, but just one person for like, well, maybe they got to figure it out, like Jesus, like the Buddha, like any of them. It's like they were just doing their thing. They were doing like living their life, not thinking. Because like if you're involved in it, if you're not being yourself, there's almost more, there can be more fear of like maintenance of what you're doing, maintaining this fitting in sort of thing because it's uncomfortable, like by design, because it's not just being yourself, just being what you are. It's a lot more difficult to relax for sure when you're trying to be something, or yeah, like fitting in. Like it's, you can't be yourself and try to fit in because what are you fitting into? Yourself. That's what you got. It's like that's it. Like you can't fit in. Period. Like end of story. Because like there's other, and it's like you find some people who are being themselves, then you can fit in there. But in terms of fitting in a way that isn't being yourself, like you can't really do both. And so there has to be that willingness to be judged or looked at in certain ways. And that's been a big one that I've tried to avoid for a long time. And meanwhile, it happens all the time.
Yeah, can't get out of it. That's the point. And one thing I kind of find funny about this, and so this is one of my favorite comments yesterday was, yeah, well, Jesus said they're God. I'm like, yeah, we're all God. Well, you're delusional. Which I thought was great, because could you imagine if this person met Jesus and Jesus is like, "Hey, we're all God," or just I'm God, straight up, they'd be like, "You're delusional," and it's because their whole thing is hinged on zombie Jesus, and this is why often you'll get the argument like, "Well, no, there's historical records that Jesus existed." Yeah, okay. None of them include him doing magic, like at all. Like there's a few mentions that there might be this Jesus figure roaming around out there doing some shit for sure, right? But none of them talk about the virgin birth. None of them refer to any of the fucking magic show that is in, and I want to make this clear, only some of the gospels. Not every gospel included all of this miracle bullshit that went on around the figure known as Yeshua, because his name was not Jesus. It really is important to remember that his name was not Jesus Christ. His name was not Jesus Christ. Jesus is a Greek word, and Christ comes from Christos, meaning the anointed, like an oil. Okay, that's the whole thing. His name was not Jesus Christ, and we focus on that because it changes him from fucking Clark Kent to Superman. Okay, his name was Yeshua. If he was here today, you'd probably call him Josh. And it helps to remember that. But who wants to listen to Josh? Only people who don't need to have that false comfort, people who don't need, a superhero to help them fall asleep at night, people who aren't trying to satisfy this childish obsession with a father figure. Like, that's the point. Right? If you don't need any of that, Josh sounds like a real cool person. And that's why I like the Gospel of Thomas, is because it really is. It's like sitting down for a fireside chat where the people around him are like, all right, well, hold on, I got questions. And he's like, all right, let's do this. And he kind of answers them as best he can. Now, again, like, we're losing stuff because it's translated, obviously, right? But there's a lot of shit in there. You're just like, huh, well, that's really interesting. Seek and you shall find. And when you find, you shall be troubled. And then you will marvel and reign over all. It's like, well, now that's a really interesting thing, because that doesn't involve anything about following Jesus. And that's a big, important part of the Bible as well. Everybody's like, oh, no, you got to worship Jesus as king. It's like, he never said that. Well, he's like, well, only through me. Yeah, but we're all me. Well, that's not what he meant. Well, how do you know? Right? And then they'll quote a chapter where it's just like, well, look, he's saying everything he taught them is the truth. It's like, right. You don't know everything he taught them. You have like a couple of dozen fragments of conversation in 4 very like pieced together kind of books. Like, that's all you got is a few that you're telling me that's all he said to them over the fucking several years he was with them. So he's like, well, he's saying he taught them the truth. Yeah, but you ain't hearing it. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, there was a lot of missed years there, huh? A lot of missed interactions there. Like, to think that we even, because there's this idea that we have this full picture of Jesus, like this whole picture. And meanwhile, what, he was 12 when he left for 18 years and there's no documentation whatsoever of his life there. Like, there's kind of this thought that, like, no, he's just like Truman Show guy. Like,
He's the son of God.
right. So I guess it doesn't even fucking matter if we have any documentation of anything at all. It's really just this thing that's like a nice to have, a comfortable thought. Like a comfortable thought, like just believing something, like believing anything. Period. Like, it's like being in a storm or like close to a tornado and believing you're safe. Like, that doesn't do anything about your safety. It's like, no, I think I am though.
Blasphemy.
Like, you think are you sure you're safe? It's like, doesn't matter. I think I am. It's like, okay. It's like, is it getting windy out here? Like, that's belief. That's belief right there. It's like, it's like this thing that's not that like crazy, like complex, difficult. It's a nice thing to think. It makes you feel kind of good, but like only when you think about it. And then the rest of the time you're doing other stuff. And then you got to think about it again, because the alternative. And I had someone today email me a really long email, uh, telling me basically that they were unfollowing me, but it was because of the slew of religious videos recently, and the Santa questioning one did it, and that was the one. And he went on and on about how, he's been through a lot of things, and he, what was it? This fuck, now I'm forgetting where that point was, where he said that there have been points when he's paying attention and recognizes like how dark and crazy and scary and frightening and potentially awful the world is, and he uses religion as a means of feeling better about that. And that's like, yeah, but that's what's creating that. That's what's leading to that, is just people having an opportunity to look and then just No, well, God's got it. Sky Daddy's got it. Something else has got it, right? Something else has to have it. And like, well, maybe there's not anything else. Maybe there's nothing else. Maybe we've done this to ourselves, and it's time for us to fucking open our eyes and wake up and realize that, oh, there's no one. Wait, there's no one coming to save us. This distraction and looking at all these things, like that's might cost us, and we're just kind of, puttering around till we get to our own sort of like self-annihilation. And there's this thought of like, oh well, all the nukes, it's like, hope not. Like anything could play out, and that's it. Like, we don't really know. There is, yeah, uncertainty for sure, but like, we're not looking at reality. Like, we're not looking at what's actually going on at all, because it's just, well, but after, but when I die, then I want to. And that's, but it's like, but look.
Yeah, but we're busy labeling things as good and evil, right? Like, and that's kind of what keeps us distracted, is the fact that we're labeling it as good and evil. And so when we look at, say, two opposing sides, let's say Russia and Ukraine, or Russia and the US, which is really what's happening, and or Israel and Palestine, we want to look at who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, and everybody argues about who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. But the problem with that is it perpetuates it, right? Because both sides feel like they're the good guy and the other one's the bad guy. But if we were to let that go and be guided by empathy, then the problem would no longer be one side or the other, but the fucking people launching the bombs and making the bombs and needing to use the bombs. And as a collective unifying force, we would look at the people who are hurting the most and hurting us at the same time, and we could address it for what it is. But we're so lost in good and evil that we're turning on each other, and we've missed the point entirely. Now, we have to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes, but I wanted to remind everybody we have a call-in show in 25 minutes. You can join us for up to 10 minutes on the episode. I will let you know the link when the call-in show is happening, and then you can join us there. After that, we're going to have a tier 2 call on Patreon. I had a funny thought, and I'm thinking that I'm going to make this either into an image or possibly a t-shirt for Dualistic Unity. I'm not sure yet. But I was walking earlier today, and I went past this church, and on the front of the church there was kind of the logo for the church, and it was these beautiful mountains, with the sun behind them, and there was like water in front of it, and it was a really nice like drawing, right? Like, it was a drawing that was meant to be very peaceful. And then standing out from the back of it is this fucking giant crucifix. And it dawned on me that I think Christians forget that this was an instrument of torture. Like, I think Christians forget that other people were nailed to this thing, like, and lined up across a hill. Like, numerous people died of their wounds, dehydration, and being eaten alive by birds on this crucifix, or crucifixes as a whole. And I think Christians forget that. And so it was just such a funny and stark contrast between the peaceful hills and the beautiful scenery and this object of death. But then it reminded me, oh, aren't we lucky that Jesus didn't die by guillotine? Could you imagine what the Christian emblems would be looking like? Like, you'd see people walking around with little guillotines around their neck. You'd see churches with like guillotines on the window. Like, there'd
Or
be guillotines
hanged in the
everywhere.
square. Just a hanging, just a noose instead of a cross. Oh my god, anything. Fucking that's amazing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I just thought, that'd actually be a really good point. And we should make some of those. If Jesus was hanged, and instead it's just like replacement of like the front of a church, it's just got a dangling rope. A church or a car on the back, and it's got like a big a noose on it. That'd be great. Yeah, we got to come up with these for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like any of them. And now I'm thinking like, if it was a sword, but like a lot of emblems are actually swords, and now I'm realizing a lot of them are actually a lot of emblems are actually weapons. I think some of them have, I mean, NRA is obviously a rifle, but like some guns like this, I don't know. But yeah, that would be dope. Because I did forget that. I mean, I've thought before just how brutal it would be if Jesus did come back. Like that sense. Oh, we did talk about that recently because I had the same thought again, that it's like that dun dun, like as he's walking down the street oh yeah, we were talking about that for a fucking video
Oh,
idea.
man, Christians would nail him back up before you could even think.
So quick. So quick. Because if he was if he said verbatim things from the Bible, and that's the thing, is like he comes back and it's just like it's just a human. Like it's
Could
just a
you
person.
imagine? He says something, and they're like, "Well, that's not what you mean."
Yeah, just gaslighting the fuck out of Jesus. Jesus would get gaslit up the ass if he came back. Oh my god. Like, because people do, like, we've been like fucking this whole podcast is saying the same sort of stuff. But like, even if someone came back, like there is no possibility for a second coming to be recognized, like straight up taking from the story of Christianity, like, because, and like, how? Oh, we would just know. I would know. It's like you wouldn't want to know. You wouldn't want to see that guy. You wouldn't want to meet him because it would take away the whole fucking story. It would take away the whole thing, because like the dead Jesus is more valuable than the alive Jesus. Like Jesus dying was the most important part of any part of his life, was his death. Like, like we appreciate his sacrifice. So his life meant nothing. So no wonder people don't pay attention to the fucking things he said. They pick things out. It's like, because that wasn't even the important part. It didn't matter what he said. It's like, wouldn't, if he was Son of God, wouldn't the most important thing be the thing that he was saying, or maybe wonder about it a little bit? But no, because the sacrifice is what saved us from our inherent wrongness. Just though we're like, think we're cracked eggs walking around. It's like, what part of you is cracked exactly that you're not, like, when you think, it's like you got to think about the crack for there to be a crack.
Oh man, I love it. I'm enjoying the shit out of your recent videos, admittedly, because you're just asking questions, But yeah, and I always love the question, like, okay, so Jesus died for our sins. Yep. It didn't seem to have worked. Well, he's coming back. Okay. And he said he was coming back. All right. So if he said he was coming back, why did he have to die for our sins? Like, if he knew he was coming back anyway, it just seems like a poorly planned strategy. But that's the point, is that you could argue back and forth about the fairy tale as much as you want to. You really can. It's important to remember that you're arguing a fairy tale, though. It's just a fairy tale that they take so seriously, they argue it as truth. And you can get really sucked into that. You really can. And I know, because I was raised Roman Catholic. And man, does that ever piss them off. It drives them nuts. Like, it really does. Somebody left a comment. He's like, oh, could you imagine being raised Roman Catholic and still being this wrong? And it's like, just let that settle in. Just let it settle in. Raised Roman Catholic, lived long ass life, no longer Roman Catholic. Maybe there's something there, but no. It's just that you're just so wrong. You're so wrong, and I'm right. That's the important part. How I look at the Bible is the right way to look at the Bible. It's like, is it? Are you sure? Well, absolutely. The Bible explains itself. Okay, what about the Unabomber? Like what about people who use the Bible for atrocious things? Well, they're not getting the Bible. They're obviously they're not real Christians. It's like, hold on, I thought you said the Bible explains itself. So they can have a misperception of the Bible. I can have a misperception of the Bible, but not you. But not you. Well, the Bible's objective truth. Even if you had an objective truth, it's still subject to your subjective reaction to it. It's still subject to your understanding of it, which is the entire point behind, love your neighbor as yourself and love God being the same thing. That makes no sense to you if you've got this idea of yourself that's separate from God. You're like, I don't get that. That's obviously saying, love your neighbor in the way that you want to be loved. It's like, no, that is definitely not what it's saying, because, that's just you being selfish.
Yeah, exactly. Like, love your neighbor as yourself. Honestly, my mind went for a second, and I don't remember if you said this exactly, but like, love your neighbor as yourself. It's not love your neighbor as yourself is, now I forget completely what I was thinking. But I had another thought before with like getting raised and even wondering about like going through your life. And again, this is still, delving into that, but like if your family was if your whole family and community was like another religion, like would you still end up, if you're Christian now and your family was like Muslim, would you still be Christian now? Like just things like that. And it's like you don't want to look at that, because a lot of it is almost all of it. Like, it's so rare for someone to shift religions. And so looking at that, it's like, okay, but again, you look at that and then it's like, yeah, but it's just more comfortable to not question it. Like, it's more comfortable to not look at it because it means all these things. And eventually there can be this, cascade. It's like pulling a thread on a potential cascade, to look at, okay, because that meant that I had the whole death thing sort of figured out. That big, open, uncertain thing. I had that checked off, but now I don't. So I'm not really sure. But okay. So I'm just gonna not do the religion thing. I'm just gonna believe in that alone and not have to do anything. Just hope for that. Hope for the continuation. Because even that, now as I'm saying, I'm like, oh shit, I still got some stuff in there for that for sure. Like when I really sit with it, because I haven't really sat with it necessarily, but you sit with that, like that point of death, whatever that is, it's like the biggest unknown, the biggest question mark, like that plays out. And then, okay, so you really start to look at here and be like, oh, whoa, 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 like this is it. This is it. Not a fucking dress rehearsal at all. It's like, I knew that. I feel like I'm saying it for the first time, but it's like, you know, you sit with it and it's like, yeah, we don't know just because you're thinking no. It's like, no, but it's gonna continue on. It's like, even if it does, and it's like there is heaven and hell, like you're still rolling the dice with that, like God hears those things that you're saying in your head too,
But
all
if you
those.
get to heaven, don't fuck it up.
Also true. Yeah, you got to stay in the heavenly stuff. Oh man, I love like like looking at heaven too, and just the overlapping. Like, it's peak, peak for everyone. It's peak to
Exactly. And certainly don't adapt to hell.
no, 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 no. Definitely. Like, even the thought of hell, like, no wonder they are so angry. Like, especially the hardcore people who believe in hell. It's like, no wonder they act like that. Like the thought of, a fiery fucking underworld that you just like somehow burn in forever, but don't actually burn out because it's eternal. Like that's enough to scare you into just doing whatever in this life to avoid that. It's like if you're really thinking that that's a thing, 'cause it's just like looking at, death, and we got what, like a couple seconds at death, and we can continue this on that call-in show too.
And we're going to on the call-in show in
Yes.
15 minutes. Somebody was just asking on Instagram, can I join? Yeah, in 15 minutes on Twitch.
Yes, exactly. So we can delve into that then, because it is 5:45 my time right now. So
Ah,
we will be
what a great
on.
way to end the episode.